And of course, so do you, because I took a lot of your calls, a lot of your emails and questions. I put them in here too. Like I have a sneaking suspicion that almost everything is tied to some kind of a scam, so I want to talk about scams and where all the money is really being made and how people are getting jilted and how businesses are really hurting. Because the business model itself, when you think about what health insurance is now, the business model makes no sense. But it's being floated. It's being floated through mandates and all the other pressures that have been put onto small business owners and, of course, individuals. And you got a gun to your head, a figurative gun to your head, because to not take part in it means to go out into the world uninsured. And of course, if you're young and healthy, that's something that you can keep up with for a while, especially if you're young, healthy, and single. But if you got a family and all that stuff, it comes to the point where everybody is forced into this, and it's become a lot bigger of an issue. I like to talk about that because, of course, that it will be a story going into the next few years. There's been quite a few questions posed to especially then candidate Donald Trump about what they would do with Obamacare. How would you bring health insurance costs down, this and that? What's the good, the bad, the ugly of it? Well, tonight, that'll be a part of what we do. And in the time that we have left over in the second half, we are going to jump into some more updates from Eastern Europe, because that's very serious stuff. That is very serious stuff. And more importantly, there's a curious part about all of the Ukraine stuff right now. The curious part is that there are a few people who are really, really hell-bent on the 25th Amendment and getting Joe Biden out of the way. Get him out of there. He's going to get us into a war. And it's coming from a lot of people who know exactly who and what Joe Biden is, and that he's not making his own decisions. And even if they took him out via the 25th Amendment, then Kamala Harris, who would LARP as president for about a month and a half, would still be doing exactly what the people who are talking to Joe Biden. She would still be obeying them. So it makes no sense to me why there are some chattering about the 25th Amendment and removing Joe Biden. Other than that, it's very clear that the psychopaths would love to have more bloodshed and a very, very big conflict thrown into the lap of Donald Trump as he comes in. So, because I don't know how much of the old ways of paralyzing the Trump administration is going to work this time around. I really don't. There's something about it that just seems like resilient. You want to know why? Because coming into this month and going into the new year, what we've already seen is a going toe-to-toe with Republicans. Okay? We've already seen that. In 2016, going into 2017, Trump was already, was very, I remember Reince Priebus from the RNC. He was like the chief of staff or something like that. I don't know. I forget who he was. But there was just so many people, so many. It's different now. Now, like going into this, there's already line in the sand. Everybody already knows. Mitch McConnell knows he's just a sandbag. That's it. It's interesting to watch there. So we'll see going forward, and I have some of that in the second half. Hopefully we can take some calls from you. All right, tomorrow night we got Jane Barlow on. She's going to be talking about her family history, herbal specialties, differentiate between essential oils, and talk about medicine cabinet items that you can source from nature. And that's going to be really fun. I also would like to say that the Polaroid Club, until November 30th, if you become a Polaroid sponsor of this show, not only do you receive a one-of-a-kind photo in the mail every month, but you are also getting other exclusives like stickers and bookmarks and sample bag of coffee and chocolate-covered espresso beans as a sign-up bonus. It's going right to your house. We have 10 Polaroid sponsors left on Patreon, 12 on Subscribestar. That's until the end of the month. Become a sponsor. It's very worth it. It really is. You have no clue. The whole other world that opens up after the fact. And also, go and give us your Christmas cards and your family Christmas photos. we would love to invite you to be a part of the December newsletter. That's going to be great because it's going to be public. So a lot of people are going to see it, and we want to show you off. Go to the forum. It's pinned to the top. You'll see Christmas cards and all that stuff. Newsletter submission, Christmas cards. Get in there. We want you guys to be a part of it. It's free. We just want to do it. Okay. First one up for you in the grab bag is from Oddity Central. A woman who heard animal noises from under her house had a naked man living there instead. An elderly California woman who thought the noises coming from beneath her home were made by animals was shocked to find a naked man living under her house. The deportations must begin immediately. A 93-year-old woman from Los Angeles, recently got the shock of her life after realizing that the bizarre noises she had begun to hear from beneath her home over the last few weeks were not made by animals, but by a man who had settled there. The woman and her family usually heard strange noises under the house during the night, so they assumed that they were made by dogs or wild animals passing through the crawl space. But last Thursday, the noises became particularly louder and seemed to be made in response to them walking through the place. They began to suspect something wasn't right, so they called the police, who found a naked man who appeared to have been living under the house for quite some time. It was actually late at night, and we just chucked it off to animals being under the house. Ricardo Silva, son-in-law of the elderly homeowner, told NBC Los Angeles the noises were kind of like knocking. It was kind of like as my wife was walking, they were kind of knocking back from under the house, so she says. So you know something's wrong. Can you imagine walking through your living room and with every walk, there's a knock that comes up from under the floorboards, like it's an Edgar Allan Poe book, a story. It's like Telltale Heart right there. It's so weird. Getting the unwanted guest out from under the house was quite the task, as he didn't want to come out. Imagine that. He was very cozy. Police spent hours trying to talk him into crawling out, and then they tried to intimidate him with police dogs. But he didn't seem worried at all. In the end, they had to force him out with tear gas. Oh, he refused to leave. He wasn't scared of the dogs. Why would he be scared of the dogs? He's living under somebody's house. I mean, you've got to just not care about a lot of things to just set up shop under somebody's house. So, I don't know. It's a bizarre thing, but not probably uncommon. You know, this day and age, people are looking for shelter. Indeed, they are. So, there you go. Oh, speaking of naked men that live under people's houses, Chunk Uygur from the Young Turks, he actually had quite an interesting, he had a few inspired thoughts on Twitter the last few hours based on what we just saw from Morning Joe, Mika and Joe, their visit to Mar-a-Lago. Pretty interesting. Take a listen to this. Let's see here. It's right here. I asked Elon Musk this was 7 hours ago, to put me in charge of cutting the Pentagon, cutting the Pentagon budget. And he said, what are you suggesting? I run the largest left-wing network online, and Democratic leaders have never asked me that question. The idea that they would take advice from a populist is disdainful to them. Now, which side seems more open and inclusive? Which side seems more welcoming? And which side really tries hard to drive you away if you disagree even a little with orthodoxy? Which side is asking for suggestions, and which side is demanding compliance and obedience? Pretty interesting, huh? He goes on. He goes, my politics haven't changed at all. I wanted to cut the Pentagon for 20 years. Do you not want to cut it because Elon or Trump does? If they really do? I mean, listen, this is what I was saying before with all these ridiculous political positions people are taking over things like cleaning up our food and our water and our air over here at home. That's for everybody. But average people have been so conditioned to go into it's just political contrarianism. I saw somebody take a cup of vegetable oil. It looked like a double shot or a triple shot of vegetable oil. And they took a shot of it, almost like to say, F you, RFK. Like, oh, wow. They're like, people are asking how they can fluoridate their own water. They're chugging vegetable oil. Can't imagine what that looked like coming out. It's nuts. It's nuts. So it's, it's just one of those things. Really one of those things. I love it. I love watching stuff like this. Cenk says, as everyone knows, I have criticisms of Trump. But at Young Turks, we also give credit where credit is due and have done so from day one. There is one thing Trump is excellent at, letting bygones be bygones. I thought this was interesting. He has done that from Morning Joe to Lindsey Graham. By the way, the same Democrats who would get mad at us for saying Trump's criminal justice reform was pretty good, and he never said bloodbath in a physical sense, that he was heroic after a shooting, etc., are the ones who are scurrying to get meetings with him and kiss his ring right now. It's true. So good on him with that. But you want to know the other thing is right there too, just from a general standpoint. You see how easy it is to have, I hate left, right, but left and right, not necessarily work together, but to be able to be in the same room and talk without thinking that you are staring down the archenemy of the universe. It's easy to do stuff like that when there's common values. That's the whole thing. And especially multiculturalism, it plays a part. That's not just multiculturalism through rampant illegal immigration or even legal immigration. Even legal immigration needs to be stopped, if you ask me, for at least 10 years. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about multiculturalism that has been taught to American kids in school, a culture that is anti-American. And you have all these things coming together. Now, one of those things, well, first of all, privacy concerns. Being anti-war, not isolationist, but non-interventionist. These are traditional American traditions. Privacy, anti-war, free speech. If those three things were held in common for everybody, seriously, we would not be in the situation we are right now. Free speech being the most important out of all those, because that is the disinfectant for bad ideas. And we always talk about that's why censorship is so important to the left, because very few ideas are good or sustainable outside of a local initiative. I think that people who think that there should be a number of things that are provided to citizens here or there, everywhere, should go and try those things out. But it has to be locally, sourced. That's it. That's it. It would be great if we could just hold those things in common more going forward, because this would be really interesting. It'd be really interesting if we can actually save our lives. But then a war would really break out. Then a war would really break out, wouldn't it? All right, let's see. 7:14. Yeah, we're doing good. Okay, let's start the show off. We will be right back, ladies and gentlemen, with our guest for the night, Chris Hamilton. It's going to be a good one. Don't go anywhere.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's go!
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here. It is a Tuesday night, as I said. It's the 19th day in November, and we have our guest tonight, Chris Hamilton. He's a partner at Hotchkiss Insurance in Texas, where he leads the employee benefits consulting practice out there. He specializes in managing healthcare and insurance costs to improve benefits coverage, reduce expenses, and enhance employee health outcomes, which of course is a very, very big thing out there, especially for independent, self-employed. Oh, what a nightmare. I can't wait to ask him questions here. He's got over a decade of experience in corporate finance and a background as a Marine. Chris has advised clients across various industries, including private equity and oil and gas. Chris Hamilton, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Frank, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you, in your bio, it ends like that, including private equity, oil, and gas, because when it comes to insurance, I would have to imagine that from where it started out in the early 20th century, it has become as big oil with the profits and everything else. And but it's crazy. It's crazy because it doesn't really seem to have. Whereas oil energy production in this country has trickle-down effects for everybody else, where you're paying cheaper for gas. What has happened to insurance has been the opposite, that there is a lot of people who have gotten rich off of it, but the rest of us are literally breaking our asses just to be able to have health insurance. And it's, where the hell do we even start in understanding what happened to us?
Well, when you mention big oil, you can probably lump defense in there as well. Just to put this into context, the size of the U.S. healthcare industry and health insurance, it's one of the largest industries in America. It's about 20% of our GDP. Just to put that into dollars, it's about $18 trillion that's spent in our economy annually and rising. So it's a very large part of our economy.
Gigantic. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, you're right. It's absolutely gigantic. And I think, one way to really understand where we are today is going back to where it all started. And if you think about health insurance in the United States, if you go back to the start of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, there wasn't a health insurance market. When somebody needed to go get health care, they went to their local doctor, they paid cash out of pocket. So if you needed an office visit, you were sick, you just paid the doctor, you could negotiate the costs, and you just paid the actual cost for care. And it wasn't really until the late 20s or the early 30s where we had our first insurance plan in the United States. It actually started in my backyard, just down the road in Dallas, Texas. And there was Baylor University Hospital launched a plan that cost $6 a month for teachers. For $6, that got you access to the hospital system there in Dallas. And that was successful. And Baylor University Health expanded that, and other hospitals in Texas started doing that into the early 30s. Eventually, what we saw is an expansion of that in California, where you saw the first actual network of hospitals. It was actually the start of Blue Cross, was in California. So these hospitals saw that this insurance plan worked, but people wanted choice of hospital. You could actually go inside of this network of hospitals in California. They called it Blue Cross. That was the start. And then eventually, as you go into the 40s, so we were post-World War II, there were wage controls, exceptionally high tax rates. So employers were trying to figure out, how do we recruit employees and how do we compensate them? We can't give them more money. The government's put price controls to try to affect inflation. So employers started providing fringe benefits, one of which was health insurance. So I can't pay you more money, you can't make more money, but I can give you this thing that you have to pay for outside of your pocket. I'm going to give it to you. And the government under Truman actually gave an incentive to employers to do it because it became tax deductible. So employees could buy health insurance, employers could tax deduct what they were spending on health insurance. And so you see this expansion of employer-sponsored health insurance. And the reason why that's important today is that most Americans get their health insurance through an employer.
Yeah.
So you just look at the market, about 60% of people that are insured today are getting it through their employer. So as you fast forward, in the 50s, Blue Cross merged with Blue Shield, which is how we got Blue Cross Blue Shield. Blue Cross was a hospital network. Blue Shield was physicians. You saw other insurers getting into the market. At one point, there were probably 15 to 20 different health insurance companies. You saw the entrance of HMOs in the 70s, so health maintenance organizations, and that was controlled access because pricing and costs for healthcare were starting to rise, and insurance companies needed a way to manage it. One of the ways they could do it is force you to go through predetermined paths of care. People in the marketplace didn't like that they didn't have much choice. The insurance company was telling you where you had to go. So you saw this emergence of what are called PPOs, which people are real familiar with now, preferred provider organizations, which kind of gave this open access. And so fast forward to today, kind of this post-Obamacare Affordable Care Act world that we live in. we can, the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act was supposed to address ability to get insurance, and it was supposed to help reduce the cost of healthcare and insurance,
Hmm.
but it's done the exact opposite. And people often ask me, well, why is that? What's going on in the healthcare markets and health insurance markets? You got to think about them as two separate things. There's healthcare, going into a doctor, going to a hospital, having a procedure done. That's healthcare. Health insurance is just the way that we pay for it. And they're two separate systems, if you will. But the rising cost of health insurance is because of the rising costs of healthcare. And so I think it's really important to understand how people make money in healthcare and how people make money in health insurance. And the reason why I think that's important is incentives drive everything. In fact, Charlie Munger has a famous, if you're familiar with Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right hand man, he has a famous quote that says, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome." And the outcome of rising health insurance and healthcare costs are due to the incentives that we have in the market today. And people will use different terms to describe it. A lot, I hear rigged, corrupt, those terms used a lot. While I can understand that sentiment, and in a lot of ways it is somewhat rigged, it's really these insurance companies and the healthcare system are just responding to the incentives that the market, that the government has mandated for them.
Well, can we go back to the 1970s? What you were saying there again, you said healthcare costs are already rising. Back then, and then now you just said that coming to where we are right now, that the reason why health insurance is becoming so expensive is because healthcare costs are rising. What is the do you believe is the root of healthcare costs rising then? Because depending on who you ask, they would surmise that insurance, being the nature of insurance it is right now, that would be incentive for healthcare providers to just raise their rates only because they know they're going to get paid, no matter what the hell it is. Kind of like what happened with the government backing student loans. Obviously, when you start creating more access to more people, you're going to have to do things like build new buildings on campus, hire more teachers, hire more custodians. So I understand that there are costs of expansion, and that's exactly what Obamacare and things like that really did. It brought more people in as consumers who wouldn't have been able to touch it otherwise. But what if that is the be all end all, that healthcare costs are rising and that is trickling up to insurance? What is making the costs rise?
Oh man, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to just try to be succinct. One, I think the first thing I would point out is that Americans are getting sicker. And if you follow in the last election,
Yep.
RFK talked a lot about it. Our food supply, our water, the toxicity of our environments, people are less active. We have a higher rates of obesity, more chronic disease. So Americans are getting sicker. If you just look at us compared to other industrialized modern economies, we're sicker than everybody else. We spend more for healthcare, but we're also sicker. And I think that, really that's what's driving it. The other thing I would add in there is there's a lot of inefficiency built in healthcare. And, hospitals are trying to figure out how do we drive down operating costs using technology and those sorts of things. But inflation is real. And this is going to relate back to the 70s, though. But if you think about today in a post-COVID era that we're in, there's a nursing shortage, there's a physician shortage. The wages for those employees are rising rapidly, which is driving up the cost of healthcare. The other thing I'd add in there is innovation. There are a lot of things, just the technological innovation that happened in the 60s and 70s all the way through today. We're able to treat conditions that people would die from. And that innovation is constantly evolving, and it comes with a price tag. And so as new treatments are coming onto the market, new drugs are coming onto the market, more sophisticated ways of providing healthcare and surgeries and being able to save people that have been involved in horrific car accidents and cancer and all these other things, there's a cost associated with that. But I think there's not one silver bullet, but when you add all those together, it paints this picture for rising on the healthcare side for healthcare. But you did make an important point. you made a really important point is what prevents providers from just being able to demand a price because the insurance company is going to pay it. And so there's some tension back and forth between healthcare providers and the insurers. So you think about the city that you're in, or any of your viewers, the city that they're in, there's probably one dominant hospital system, a really big one, or maybe there's two if you're in a big city, two big hospital systems. It didn't used to be that way. 20 years ago, there were multiple hospital systems. But what happened after the ACA was passed, the Affordable Care Act was passed? You saw hospitals merging with other hospitals, buying other hospitals, and they didn't stop there. They were buying physician practices. They were
Yeah.
buying specialty clinics. They were buying outpatient surgery and physical therapy and every ologist you can name, dermatology, orthopedic surgeons, all these oncologists. They were buying all these specialty practices to become really big. And what ended up happening is it creates less competition. The hospital gets really large and they become a price setter in a market. So if you name any one of the big insurance companies, which by the way, we talked about, there used to be 15 to 20 of them, there's four big ones now. And so what you have in any market across the United States is one or two really dominant systems in an area. Those big insurance companies have to have that hospital and network or they're going to lose customers. The hospital is going to be able to demand the price that they want to pay, that they want to be paid, or else will drop out of your network. You see this all the time.
Yeah.
Where a hospital threatens to, we're going to drop out of your network, and then there's this disruption, and employers start complaining. They end up paying the piper. The insurance companies do. Ultimately, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there's just something else here too. When you say there's only two providers in an entire region, or the two main providers, of course, anybody who has basic understandings of market economics, and that's all my understanding really is basic. I say, okay, well, lack of competition is going to be an issue here. And of course, with everything that the government does, it always destroys the little person, where with any kind of regulation is always sold in a way where, okay, well, we're going to make sure that the big companies are kept in good behavior. But every regulation actually keeps small people from sprouting up and actually providing something new. For example, with the ACA, when Obamacare was put out there, I was working at a gym here in New York. I was working at a gym, and it was great because I was there part-time because half of my work was there, and then I had private clients and all that. But even there at this gym, I was able to get really good part-time insurance. And it was almost like a la carte as well. I had catastrophic. I could go there and get the physicals. I even had dental, part-time insurance. And of course, that all went away because once the ACA kicked in, I couldn't have something that small and boutique because I needed mammograms as well. Things like that, ridiculous stuff. And I just think about that, and it also just makes me wonder, where are we ever going to be able to get back to that again? And I think that's why a lot of people are wondering whether or not that we're going to be able to do some big repeal work and just open up the ability for companies to innovate once more.
Yeah, you made some really good points. So I'm guessing the insurance that you described that you had through the gym, that was definitely pre-ACA.
Oh, definitely, because it was taken away afterwards. I was effectively without insurance after the ACA came into being.
So the couple things I really want to hit on, it's important for viewers to understand. What the ACA did is it removed a lot of limitations. So the plan that you had, and this is why we had so many insurance companies prior, is that they could custom design plans to cover what the employees and the employer wanted. And what the ACA did is said, you're no longer going to be able to make these customized plans. We're going to set mandates for what you have to cover, and you have to cover it in an unlimited basis. So back in the day, you could buy a plan that it would only cover up to $500,000 a year or $1 million a year coverage, and you could exclude certain things and include what you wanted. You could custom make it, like you said, a la carte. And the ACA completely did away with that and said, nope, you're going to cover all of these things on an unlimited basis. And when you walk into a grocery store and you just load the cart with everything, your grocery bill goes up. Well, the same thing happens with health insurance. The more you cover and the more you pay for it, the higher the price tag is going to be. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to understand. We talked a lot about the healthcare side of this. what did it do to the insurance companies and what's their profit motive in this? By the way, they help write the legislation, which is, in one hand, it's kind of smart because our legislators, they're not experts in this. They don't understand healthcare and they don't understand the implications of this. But one of the things that was included in, and I want to talk about how health insurance companies make money because it's driving pricing higher. They don't really care what things cost, if I'm going to be completely honest, which I think is one of the biggest problems that we have. There's a provision in the Affordable Care Act called the medical loss ratio rebate. And essentially what it does is it requires health insurance companies to take 85% of the premium dollars they're taking from you and me and every viewer here. And in total, they have to spend 85 cents of those dollars on our healthcare. Well, Frank, think about this for a second. If I've got to spend 85% of what I take in on healthcare, that leaves 15% for my profit. And if you're an insurance company and you're publicly traded, you report to shareholders on Wall Street, do you want 15% of $1 million or do you want 15% of $1 trillion?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, what these insurance companies have done is they've become like Vegas bookies. And they're looking at this saying, I'm only going to be able to skim the till for 15%. I need to figure out how I can get 15% of more bets. And so what they're doing is they're off putting their bets from, on one hand, you've got insured people. The other side, you've got the healthcare system. And so what they need is willing participants on both sides of that, and they need the participants to go up. So the ACA was really good for them because it required everybody by law to have insurance. And then they had to figure out how are we going to pay out to the providers. But what they've done, so immediately I talked about the incentives, right? Charlie Munger said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. That incentive alone is what's driving insurance premiums up. But they've taken it 10 steps further, the insurance companies have. If you look at what their business model is, we think that, well, they're just there to pay for our healthcare, but they actually profit from rising healthcare costs. And if you look at United Healthcare or Blue Cross or Aetna, Cigna, they're vertically integrated into our healthcare ecosystem. What I mean by that is when there's been a lot of talk recently in the last couple election cycles about pharmacy benefit managers and big pharma and how they make money and charge insurance plans and that sort of thing. They all own their their own pharmacy benefit management, and all the pharmacy benefit manager does for the insurance company is set the price of drugs. When you or I walk into a pharmacy, we show our ID card, they're determining the contracted price. But that creates this conflict of interest because very few people understand what medications should cost or healthcare. They don't understand what it should cost. So I can walk in and buy a Big Mac at McDonald's and they're going to show me the price. They're going to show me how many calories, how much protein. I know exactly what I'm getting. I know the quality or the lack of quality. I know everything before I buy it, right? But I can go in and get an ACL surgery on my knee and I have no idea what it's going to cost. I have no idea what the quality of the hospital or the doctor is going to be. I'm just going to pay my deductible and my out of pocket. And so when you see insurance companies now being involved in healthcare, so go back to the pharmacy piece of this, they're setting the contracted price for a drug. Let's just say the drug should really cost $30. They tell the pharmacy, no, that drug's actually going to be $50. Where does the $20 difference go? It goes back into the back pocket of the insurance company. And the profits that they make from their subsidiaries, all the healthcare ecosystem they own, the profit there is uncapped. They have unlimited earning potential. And so when you look at their financial statements, that's where they make most of their money, is on pharmaceuticals and on healthcare provision. A lot of these insurance companies, they now own physician groups, they own clinics and hospital facilities. And routinely what we see is they overcharge themselves for medications and healthcare. Because remember, they got to pay 85 cents of every dollar on our healthcare. So what ends up happening, so many of your viewers may not know this, but at the end of the year, they're going to show, well, guys, we spent 90% of your healthcare dollars. We have to raise your premium because of that. We have to be able to make some money. So we're going to raise your premiums because what they don't show you is how much money they put into their back pocket on their claims. And they're using it as justification to raise our health insurance premiums. I think that's that's kind of that's not kind of it. That's a scam.
It's a huge scam.
Because people, you don't have a choice. If you have health insurance today, you don't get to pick who's my pharmacy benefit manager or what are we paying at contracted rates for providers, which by the way, they may own, they may be part of their system. They're profiting from that. And at the end of the year, they're saying we're losing money on this or we're not making what we should. we have to raise the premium. And it's a circular reference. If you've ever seen in an Excel file, you put numbers tied to each other, it just continually repeats the calculation, and that's why you're seeing this spiral
Yeah.
up and up way. And they're profiting from it at the same time. And the common question when I explain this to people is, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't the government do anything about it? And when you look, we talk about big oil and defense. We think of those industries as the dominant industries in our economy. We talk about lobbyists in Washington. They're paying off our politicians. They're buying influence. But if you look at the actual dollars that are spent in Washington, Frank, the healthcare lobby, and I'm talking about hospitals, big insurance companies, physician groups, the insurers, all of the makers and the players in that industry. There's not a ton of them, but when you look at what they spend in Washington every single year, and really just over the last 10 years, it's over $6 billion. So just to put that into perspective, that's 2.5 times the size of oil and gas, big oil, and the defense industrial complex combined. So when you start talking about who has influence in Washington, it's the big insurance companies and the healthcare lobby. That's the largest industry by spending in Washington. The other question I would ask, Frank, if you think about it for a second, if somebody really wanted change in healthcare, if they had that kind of money and over a decade to do it, don't you think we would have something different? So it tells me they're lobbying for more of the same.
Yeah, they want status quo is good for everybody. And that's another part of the reason why, aside from the fact that we know that everybody in Congress are prolific inside traders, but it's another part of the reason why you see these lifelong politicians who really have no skills, no real any real talents for the world, but they seem to get elected every 2, 4, 6 years, and they come in and they get a paltry 6-figure salary, and they leave tens of millions of dollars in their accounts. Where the hell they come from, I don't know. Maybe they're gambling. And that's what I wanted to ask you. You used a gambling reference there, and I wanted to ask you a question about the model, the business model, which of course you just really laid out in a great way there. But I guess the biggest question was, when I was really analyzing this for the first time with seriousness, I was like, is this really even insurance? Because when I was first told about what insurance was, I was taught that insurance was a gamble that both parties take. The patient is betting that they're going to get sick eventually. The insurance company is betting that they won't get sick. And everyone agrees to terms based on risk and whatever else kind of factors you're putting on in there. And then you just say, okay, let's do some business. But the more government gets involved here, and the more that this legislation is written and all that stuff, it's not insurance. First, it seems like welfare, but because there's no real reason. It's harder and harder to tell somebody no, especially if they can't pay for it. If they're making too much money, of course, then they charge you an arm and a leg. But if you are, it actually incentivizes people to have less and less, because that's the only time you get your free health care. But the costs, we were talking about big oil before. Oil and energy industry, they go into business producing something domestically. Everybody really gets a trickle-down effect from that, because we go from $5 a gallon of gasoline down to, $1.25 or something like that. But what we have over here is the costs are basically passed to private businesses and to self-employed people. And anybody out there who's out there, working and is above the poverty line, we're getting destroyed to keep this thing afloat, because otherwise, this is a business model that should put the insurance business into I don't know, it's dead. I mean, you think about that. If you tell somebody an insurance business that's based on mutual risk assessment of two parties, and the risk is taken out of it, and you're telling insurance companies everybody needs to be insured, pre-existing conditions, risk doesn't matter, it has to be that way by government mandate, then, I mean, you're essentially mandating a normal business into destitution. But, of course, like everything else, they are leeching off of us to keep this terrible idea afloat.
Well, so you made some really good points there. So let's break that down. The industries that you mentioned, I'm just going to say oil and gas, technology, televisions. You remember when plasma televisions came out?
Oh yeah.
It was like the first one that came out was like $10,000, right? You can't even get that same TV anymore. You get something that's 10 times better for $500 or less. The price of that has come down. Well, let's think about what happened in the technology space for televisions. One, there's a ton of competition. A lot of different companies were competing on technology, innovation, production efficiency. You think about from the consumer standpoint, I can go buy a television at a local department store. I can go to Walmart or Target or Best Buy, if that even exists anymore. People can go online. They can buy them at Amazon. There's just all these different ways that I can buy it. I can read reviews. People know more about the television they're going to buy than the healthcare and health insurance that they're going to buy. And what do we have there? There's tons of competition, tons of information, there's transparency, and there's multiple ways that I can pay for it. I can pay cash, I can put it on a payment plan, I can use a credit card. But the two parties know what they're selling, they know what they're buying, and they know everything about it. Think about healthcare now and health insurance. It's the complete opposite. And if you were to look at the inflation rate of health insurance and healthcare versus televisions, they're opposite directions. One is up and to the right, and one is down and to the right. So television's been deflationary. It's less expensive over time. Healthcare is the exact opposite, and they have the exact opposite dynamics. You mentioned it earlier. There's only a handful of players in the health insurance market. You look at the hospital systems, there's only a handful in any given market that you go to. There's no competition. And that's been a big talk for a long time about health insurance. Should we go to a single payer system, Medicare for all? Because the free market, capitalism isn't working in health insurance and healthcare. And my response to that is we don't have a competitive marketplace. The capitalism in healthcare is not working today. There's no competition. You have a handful of people. It's more like an oligopoly. There's a handful of people and entities that control healthcare and they control health insurance, which is why we're seeing a different outcome for healthcare versus televisions. Consumers don't have the ability to see what something's going to cost before they buy it. And furthermore, when they do go to buy it, if you've got insurance, they don't tell you the true price. They just tell you it's your deductible. If you go have a surgery, if you've ever had to have a shoulder surgery or an MRI or a healthcare procedure, you don't really know what it's going to cost. And that's a problem. And you don't know the quality either. So they're not posting quality scores. And when you look at what the hospital lobby did when hospital pricing transparency, that's part of the law. Hospitals have to post their prices. And they fought tooth and nail to not have to post their prices. And many hospitals still today are not compliant with that law, posting their prices for cash buyers or if you've got insurance. By the way, why is it different if I have health insurance versus if I pay cash? So you have a complete different set of market dynamics in healthcare and insurance than you do for everything else that we buy in the United States. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
It is. It is. And I think one of the bigger issues inside of this greater subject was the pre-existing conditions thing for me, because it went back to my basic understanding of this risk business that is insurance. And I'd say, is this even really insurance? It's just terms we use. I mean, first of all, pre-existing conditions. How do you solve something like that at this point? I mean, it's terrible to be chronically ill, but it's also a terrible prospect for a business to take on a client who from the get-go is going to take far more than they're putting in. And so nothing about the business model makes sense, which of course is why you think about who's really bearing the brunt of it. It is the working class. It is the small and medium-sized businesses around the country. So I would love for you to talk about that a little bit more here, because it can't be stressed enough what healthcare is doing to the job market because of the stress being placed on employers, number one. Of course, those who are selling this scam to the country, they're always encouraging patients to call employers greedy or whatever the hell like that when it comes to health insurance. But it's literally the difference sometimes between being able to pay a salary or not. And which is why when the ACA came in, everybody's talking about the job numbers after the Affordable Care Act was put into play. We started noticing something, that they were all part-time jobs, that it was the birth of what was called the 39 and a halfers, because 39 and a half hours was a half hour before the employer had to kick in with health insurance. So you talk a little bit about what this does to the job market and people being able to, establish themselves financially when, when their employers are hamstrung by these government regulations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One thing I would clarify is the Affordable Care Act. Somebody's considered full-time if they work 30 hours a week.
Oh, 29 and a halfers then.
Yeah, 29 and a half. So that was the government knew that employers were going to try to pull that, hey, we're going to just not let people work 40 hours. We'll do 39 and a half. So that was one of the provisions in the law that you're considered full-time if you're working 30 hours a week. Just like everything else in our economy, as prices rise, if you build houses, this is something that we've seen post-COVID. Home builders are raising the price of houses. Why? The cost of lumber is rising. The cost of concrete was rising. Roofing materials, all the input costs, they're passing that on to home buyers. The same thing is true for every other industry. When you look at input costs, when wages rise, when health insurance rises, it's a cost that's going to be passed on to the end consumer of what, it doesn't matter the industry. And to the point you made, employers are struggling with the rising cost of health insurance in the current system. Now, there are things that a lot of employers that are creative and forward thinking are doing to solve that issue, because there are ways to insert competition inside of a health plan. There are ways to buy healthcare and insurance more effectively, where you can lower the cost of the company, provide more benefits to employees. And in a lot of cases, employers are able to provide access to free healthcare if you do it right. But you can't underscore the point enough that healthcare is really impacting the average business today. And it's making it hard for them to grow their businesses, pay their employees, because they're now being burdened with rising health insurance costs. Because one of the other pieces of the Affordable Care Act is the employers are mandated by law to make it affordable. And whether it's affordable or not, we can debate that, but there are certain parameters that employers are only allowed to charge employees so much for employee coverage. As costs continue to rise, employers are having to bear more of the cost, which does prevent them from being able to expand their workforce, to invest back in their businesses, and so forth.
Okay, I want to ask you something about as far as solutions, because I know that's what your line of work is. Solutions, especially within this current paradigm that we have in this country. And then after that, I want to get into questions that I have and what people from the audience have submitted today about scams. I want certain things that everybody just assumes it's a scam. We want to know, as an insider yourself, we want to know how the sausage is made and where all the red flags really are. But let's just talk about personal health insurance, because we understand the businesses. But me, for example, I'm self-employed. I've been completely priced out of traditional health insurance, completely. My family and I are very grateful for MediShare. It's a Christian cost-sharing company. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
And it essentially provides everything that insurance does, but they have different terminology, so they don't use words like deductible or whatever. But if it weren't for them, I'd be eating a lot less. I'll tell you, Chris, because that I would literally everything that I make would be going toward a bronze level family plan from MVP over here in New York. Bronze level. The deductibles for a family of 3 is I can't afford it. Thank God for MediShare. And so this is what I was talking about before with the idea of the flexibility that I had with the part-time insurance in my gym years ago, a la carte insurance, all that, because, is there any way out of this for people like me? Is there some kind of boutique insurer? Do you see something in the horizon? Anything we can be doing right now that is usually overlooked that is very, very affordable, actually cost efficient?
Yeah. So when you mention MediShare, there's a number of sharing type plans. Some of them are religiously affiliated, some of them are not. But if you look at the way they run that business model compared to a traditional insurer, one of the reasons they are able to offer certain types of coverage at a lower cost is because of what they're paying for healthcare. So take one of those, MediShare or Sedera or some of these others that are out there. When you need to go have, you're married, it sounds like you've got some kids. If your wife is going to have a baby, she's going to go into a hospital, have the baby. They don't pay the same way an insurance company does. They're paying a cash negotiated price. So what are they doing there? They're not paying $30,000 for a childbirth. They're probably paying 5 to 7,000, maybe $10,000 for that. They're paying a third. And when you pay less for healthcare, you can charge less for the insurance. And I know it's not insurance, but it essentially is functioning like
Right.
insurance. The other thing that they're doing, a lot of those sharing plans they may have pre-existing condition limitations. They may not cover preventative care at 100%. They may not cover certain chronic medications. Okay, so there are limitations in some of those plans. I don't know the specific plan that you have, but by carving some of those types of coverages out, they're able to bring the price point down. So there's two things they're doing. They're customizing the coverage, and they're not paying full retail price that a traditional insurer would pay to a hospital. So they're managing the cost of the actual payments for healthcare much differently than a traditional insurer does, which allows them to offer coverage to you at a much lower cost. And when it comes to individual plans, there have been a couple of entrants into the market that haven't had a whole lot of success, trying to take traditional insurance and offering it at scale. So really what you're seeing across the United States are the traditional insurers, name one of the big four. They're offering HMO style plans, and you just hit the nail on the head. Even the cost for a bronze level plan is
It's
astronomical. They're going to
horrible.
have huge deductibles and out of pockets. My specialty is working with employers to fix rising health insurance costs and improve the coverage in them. And one of the ways that we do that is we break apart the health insurance ecosystem. So I talked about how the health insurance companies, they'll own their own pharmacy benefit manager, which is where they make most of their money. And so we break that apart from an insurance company. We may use their network, but we're going to put a vendor that's in line with the outcome of the employer, which benefits the employee. So think about this. We talked about how they're skimming off the price of medications. They're taking rebates from drug manufacturers. They're managing their covered drugs based on how much money they can get from a manufacturer. That's a misaligned incentive. And so with employers, if you teach them how to break that system apart, you can put providers, you can put vendors in there that are aligned with the goal of reducing the cost without removing coverage. So if there's a drug that's $100,000 a year, which we see drugs all the time that they run 100 to $500,000 a year for a course of treatment.
It's crazy.
Some of them are going to be ongoing. Wouldn't it make sense if that drug's $100,000 a year and I have a different pharmacy I can get it from that's only $40,000? Wouldn't it make sense to go buy that drug at that pharmacy versus the one down the street? And by the way, if the health insurer is skimming tens of thousands of dollars off that one medication, what if we just stop that and we put in the contract they're not allowed to do that? All that money goes back to the employer, which allows them to make the health insurance more affordable. And we do that systematically through each of the types of coverage. When you're talking about surgeries or having a baby or getting imaging, there's ways, just like your sharing plan, where we're able to access those outlets at a much lower price point. And when the members do that, we just waive, if they're willing to go through one of those providers, you just waive the cost of care. So if somebody's got a $3,000 deductible, if you go to hospital A, that's the highest cost hospital in the entire market. But hospital B, right across the street, is a fraction of the cost. If you choose hospital B, it's completely free. You have no cost to do it.
Yeah.
And so being able to contract with the right hospitals that are willing to say, hey, if we just cut out the insurance middleman in this thing, we'll provide you the same care at a fraction of the cost, which allows employers to lower the cost of insurance to their employees. And at the secondary level, they're able to waive the cost of care for their employees. So managing pharmacy, the cost of drugs, medications, and then managing the cost of care. If you're able to do those two things, you can provide a lot more benefit for a fraction of the cost.
And I know it's possible too. We are big. We're big advocates of direct care model. Our family physician, who actually we see tomorrow for our physicals, direct care. We met her at a farmer's market. And of course, working through her, we get discounts for labs if we want to get, blood checked or whatever the hell. So it's been really, really great. And that's just a small little bit amount of money directly to her every month. And we've been with her since our daughter was born in 2020. We were already with her for 3 years at that point. So it's been wonderful. Of course, when you get outside of that, if you have to go to an emergency room, catastrophic care, that's something that people, dread. And I understand we all just got to take care of ourselves better. But, the longer you live, the higher the chances that something freak is going to happen. And we went to, my wife and I had to make a late night trip to the emergency room in April of this year. And, when they say ask us for an insurance card, and let me just say, I wish I could hand over my insurance card again and have it all just be processed and not have to go home and take a bill that comes 4 weeks later and register it with the cost sharing company and all that stuff and do all that extra stuff. I want to get back to that. I really would love that. But while we were there, we had a couple of things. There was, at least saline that we got. There's a couple of other things that we received. There was a CAT scan that was taken. So as all this is going on, my imagination's going wild. Okay, there's $5,000. There's this, there's that. Yeah. And then when we see the bill, a couple of, they were telling us when they were putting it all together, they asked if we had insurance. Again, we said, no, not traditional, at least. And right off the bat, they gave us a 50% discount on everything, Chris. I said, it's like, who can give a 50% discount on anything? Unless, of course, there is the insurance factor. They know they can get 50% more. There's other costs. There has to be incentives built into that. So just like we were saying before, going over here for one price, over here for the other, we saw the flexibility that this one particular hospital around here had just when we told them that we didn't have any traditional insurance. 50% came off the top. What business can take half of the price off just willy-nilly if it wasn't marked up already? So it's nuts.
Yeah, it is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. I mentioned hospital price transparency, hospitals being required to post their prices.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Baylor University Health, which is now Baylor Scott and White in Dallas. They actually published their prices. They were one of the first hospitals in the United States to publish their pricing. And it was actually published in the New York Times, of all places. The New York Times did a really great article on pricing transparency, how most hospitals weren't being compliant with the law, but Baylor was one of them that did. And what was interesting, your viewers can look this up to see for themselves what pricing costs with insurance and without. But to your exact example, they use an example of somebody going in and getting an x-ray on their foot. And the price using Blue Cross was or United Health was like $800, and using Blue Cross was $1,800. But using no insurance at all, if you're a cash buyer, you got a lower price than both of the insurance companies. That right there just tells me, the question I asked, kind of a head scratcher. How did two of the biggest healthcare buying organizations not get a better deal than you or me walking in off the street? And I think it really goes back to the way they contract and their incentive or disincentive, the way they make money. But you mentioned one thing I think is really interesting that I think your viewers need to be aware of. You talked about your experience with your doctor. So think about a traditional doctor's office, right? They're probably owned by a hospital system or some big physician group. Think about the last time you went into a traditional doctor. The waiting room was probably full. And when you went into the exam room, the doctor, you could hear him ping-ponging back and forth from room to room. You hear the knock, it's the one next to you. You hear him go across the hall. When he finally comes in, or he or she comes in, how much time do you get with that doctor?
Nothing.
Usually 3 to 5 minutes is what you get. In my mind, that's not real healthcare. That's a doctor coming in to diagnose something really quick. You're going to walk out of there with a referral to a specialist or a prescription medication. That's really what you're getting. And so they're there to triage. But talk about your experience with your physician. So this is a completely contrasted model, what you're describing. It can be called concierge medicine. It can be called direct primary care. Those are the two big terms that we hear. But it sounds like your doctor is very in line with this. They probably don't take insurance, right? You pay them a monthly fee.
Oh, they do. And that's the best part. They do. And she is also on the side. Not only does she teach at a university local nearby, but she also practices with a larger network. But she also gets the importance of reestablishing direct care model. And not only before my daughter was born, it was, and it's still to this day, whenever we have, physicals, we block off a lot of time because we talk. And there's height, weight. She's doing all the reflex tests and tapping the stomach and shit like that. But other than that, just a very personalized situation. I'll give you another example, Chris. Over the course of my daughter's first year and a half of life, we only brought our daughter to her doctor's office once, probably around her first birthday. Every major benchmark, weigh in, checkup, check under the arms, skin, just how's she doing, measure the skull, all that stuff. House calls. We had house calls, and we still to this day, if we prefer her come to the house, she comes right to us. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And if it weren't for this lurking monster that hangs over all of us, which is the hospital systems and the uncertainties in life, I would be so happy right now, but it's a lot.
Yeah. So really in the most forward-thinking, most effective models that we're seeing with employers, they're merging what you're talking about, direct care models. So we see a lot of physicians that work inside of big hospital systems that are getting burned out. They don't like being told how to treat a patient based on what the insurance company is going to pay. And you go back to the traditional doctor model, the reason why they herd us through like cattle is because they're only going to get paid a certain amount for that visit.
Yeah.
And so what's the incentive? I go back to incentives every time. How many patients can I see in a day? And an average physician in America today is seeing 30 to 40 patients a day. Doesn't give them a lot of time to see patients and provide true healthcare, which is what they got in the business to do. And so what you're seeing is a lot of doctors, sounds like your doctor is kind of in a hybrid model, which maybe she's stair-stepping to get into full direct care. That's what we see a lot of physicians doing. But I think one of the biggest waves that we see right now in health insurance in healthcare is doctors that are saying, I'm no longer going to participate in this traditional system where I only get paid a office visit fee and I'm incentivized to see as many patients as possible. I want to provide true healthcare to people. That's what I got in the business to do. And so they're leaving traditional practices of medicine to open up direct care offices. And what it allows them to do several things. One, it's like Netflix for doctors. So you pay a subscription fee and you have unlimited access to the doctor, whether you want to see him one time a year or you want to see him 12 times a year. Okay, so you get unlimited access for that fee. What does that provide to the doctor? A recurring revenue stream. What does it do to their incentive? Their incentive is to keep you happy, because if you're not happy and satisfied with the care, you're going to leave. You're going to go somewhere else. But what's the third thing it does? It makes sure they're able to provide the right health care to keep you healthy and out of their office. They want to keep you healthy. Traditional doctors, the sicker you are, the more frequent you're coming in, the more money they're able to make. So you've just taken the incentive model and flipped it on its head. And so where we see the best of both worlds coming together is, imagine if you had access to that doctor that you've got today, but she was able to coordinate your care through an emergency room or through a hospital, whatever you need, and the insurance then was able to cover it and pay a fair price for it. And that's where employers really have the power that they don't even realize they have, is to merge those two things together. Employers they don't have to use insurance networks to pay for hospitals or emergency rooms or medications. You can custom design a plan to pay what's fair and reasonable and marry that with a direct care provider or a network of direct care providers that are incentivized to make sure you're healthy, you get all the things that you need. But when you do need to go in an emergency room, we have a way to coordinate you to make sure we're going to pay the fair price. And it's part of your insurance plan. And the reason employers can do this, if you just walk in off the street, it's a lot harder to negotiate with a hospital. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. You're going to get a different experience depending on what hospital you walk into. But employers that do this, if you've got an employer that has 50 employees and you combine them with somebody that's got 1,000 or 5,000 employees, you've now got scale that you can take to a hospital and negotiate a better deal. And when you put all the pieces together, you're just trying to figure out, you're running it like an entrepreneur versus like a big bureaucracy. And you align everybody's incentives in the value chain, if you will, to produce the outcome that you want, which is better healthcare, lower cost. And my mission has been to teach employers how to do this for their companies. You do it one employer at a time. And you just think about the average size employer in the United States. maybe they spend $1 million a year in health insurance for their
Hmm.
employee. Most people don't know what health insurance really costs an employer. It's an astronomical amount of money. I mean, I see employers that pay $1 million or all the way up to $50 million a year for health insurance, which that's not even a large national employer, by the way. But when you take one of those employers and you're able to cut the cost of their insurance 30%,
Yeah.
it could be 300 grand or it could be $3 million. What does that do? That's another $3 million they have to pay wage increases, pay bonuses, reinvest in their business, expand. It's capital they now have to deploy back into their business, which at the end of the day, if the employer is not making money and they don't have more capital to invest, it's actually a detriment to the employees because they're not getting pay raises. They're getting increases to the cost of their health insurance. It's actually threatening some employers. The healthcare budget has gotten so high, it's threatening their ability to go take on more work. So you think about a manufacturer, they're not able to expand their plant. That means we may not have work for these employees at some point because we're having to pay for in a broken healthcare system.
So you're saying that essentially, as bad as things are right now, there are a lot of ways, little known ways that people can really lean out and maximize the quality of what they're providing to themselves and their employees. And you in particular, you that's what you do daily for a living.
Oh yeah, that's how I got into this business. So my background is I spent 15 years in corporate finance and banking. And so I worked with a lot of mid-sized and large employers. And when the ACA was passed, one of my biggest clients was a health insurance brokerage. Is one of the largest ones in the country. And at that time, there was a lot of thought in the market that this was going to really hurt brokerages. And once I learned how this was actually going to benefit those in my position that I'm in today, I realized, wait a minute, you're telling me the market works this way. I see what it's doing to my other clients. So I started asking manufacturers, transportation companies, wholesalers, hey, this is one of the most expensive things on your income statement, your P&L. You spend a lot of money, millions of dollars a year on healthcare. How do you manage that cost?
Hmm.
And what was surprising to me, these are really smart people, CFOs and CEOs of these companies. And they just looked at me and said, well, there's not really any way to manage it. It's just whatever the insurance company and our broker down the street tells us it's going to cost us next year. We just assume it's going to rise every single year. And I thought to myself, one of these companies, a big national company, you probably own some of their products, they could tell me what their plastic input parts, they use a lot of plastic in their manufacturing process. That CFO could tell me 2 and 3 years from now what those parts were going to cost because they had hedged their materials costs. And I thought, why don't you take a similar approach to your health insurance? I mean, this is a huge item. I mean, you guys are spending $50 million a year in healthcare. Why do you not manage it like a division of your business? They turn the keys over to the insurance company and their broker, which, by the way, they don't have the interest of managing the cost for you. Their interest is it needs to go
It has
up.
to go up.
And so when you kind of tie in this third leg of the stool, I talk about hospitals and healthcare. I talk about the insurance companies. What the light bulb that clicked in my head, I never thought I would be in the health insurance business. I mean, insurance is like not sexy. It's not cool. You don't want to tell your friends, I do insurance for a living. But I realized there was a business opportunity where I could create a really good business that could do good things for employers, which would in turn allow those employers to do something really good for their employees. And it was going to be good for society. And so, where the brokerage industry is the third leg of this stool. So, I talked about incentives. I'm going to harp on it again. What's the incentive of a brokerage? Most brokers, like people that I compete against on a day-to-day basis, they get paid a commission based on the premium that you pay, that the employer is paying for health insurance. So if premiums continue to rise, so does my paycheck. So I think that's a big misaligned incentive. And a lot of brokerages are switching to fee-based planning, which is the right move. But these big insurance companies, at the end of the year, they come to us at the beginning of the year and say, hey, this is your block of business with us today. Just name the big insurance company. Hey, broker, if you keep all those clients with us and you add this many more, we're going to pay you a really big bonus to do that. And so, just like they're buying influence in Washington, they're buying influence from the very people that your employer trusts to help them solve the problem. So, take a manufacturing company or a car dealership or a trucking company. They're experts in that specific industry. I know cars. I'm a car dealer. I know exactly what cars cost. I know what I sell them. I know how to make money in this industry. But guess what they're not experts in, Frank? Healthcare. That's
Yeah.
why they hire a broker. They hire somebody who is an expert in that industry to have their best interests at heart and teach them and show them and consult with them how to solve the problem. But if your broker's taking a big bonus at the end of the year, and if you look up you just Google the top 50 brokerages in America, the majority of them, almost to a T, there's maybe one or two that are not, they're either publicly traded or they're owned by private equity. So they have to answer to shareholders and people that want larger returns. Are they going to cut their nose off to spite their face and say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to do this the right way. They're going to be cannibalizing their earnings because those bonuses, and many times they're 7 and 8 figure bonuses from those companies. And so the employer who thinks that their broker is there with their best interests at heart, they're being told by somebody up at corporate, we're going to continue pushing the status quo because that's how we get paid.
Yeah.
And so as an outsider to the industry before I got into it, I realized this entire system is rife with conflicts of interest and misaligned incentives. The way to solve rising health insurance costs is to figure out how to pay the right price for healthcare. And if I could show employers how to do this, it's going to help lower their costs. They can provide more to the employees. We can fix this. And when I think about the societal benefit to this, I mean, really, I'm on a mission, and there's others like me out there nationally that view this. There's been talk of single payer Medicare for all really since the 40s. It started with Roosevelt. Roosevelt wanted a Medicare for all system. You think about FDR, that's what he wanted. And just about every election cycle, all the way up through Bill Clinton, Hillary ran on it, Kamala ran on it. We want to expand Medicare. While it's well-intentioned, it's actually Medicare that's crashing the commercial insurance markets. And a lot of people don't talk about that.
Oh, I know.
Medicare pays such a low rate to the hospitals can't demand prices. We talked about that. They can go to Blue Cross or United Healthcare and say, hey, guess what? You're going to pay me 30% more next year for me to be in network. They can't do that to the government. So when the government's not paying a fair price for healthcare services for Medicare and Medicaid, where do they make up the shortfall? They go back to the commercial market and demand a higher price. But just kind of tying all those pieces together really tells the story of why health insurance costs just in the broader market continually to rise, and they're not going to stop. The only way to stop it is to break apart that system. And employers are, a lot of folks who are looking to the government to solve the problem. The solutions are already at our fingertips. You just have to work with advisors that really know how to build it. And these aren't new. There's an employer that wrote a book. He's out of Wisconsin. And it's the name of the book is called The Employer That Fixed Healthcare. And he chronicles what he did for his company because he literally said, this is going to put my business out of business. We're going to put my company out of business. He was a mid-market company. He was manufacturing auto parts for GM and Ford. And they were demanding lower prices, yet health care costs kept rising. He put a common sense plan in place to address it, and it made his business more profitable, helped him expand. But the craziest thing, after I read the book, I thought, man, when was this book written? It was written in 2009, before the Affordable Care Act. So a lot of the things that we're doing, we see success being had with employers are not new. These things have been around for a long time. It's common sense approaches, the same way we've managed everything else in our personal lives and our business lives. It's just the insurance company, the healthcare industry, and the brokerage community aren't using those same philosophies.
Well, to your point, I think decentralization, and that's always a very it's a frequently pushed solution, or at least a part of the solution on this show. Decentralization is a big thing. I mean, obviously, as healthcare technology and everything else becomes more and more advanced, when we talk about surgeries and the types of things that we're doing, on such a micro level is just so specialized. Obviously, costs are going to rise as specialization continues to rise as well, and that's not a bad thing. That's logical. But as far as other little things, it would be great to see people when it comes to preventative care. It would be great to see things like, again, like you said to start this off, the country is incredibly unhealthy. To see people starting to take their health into their own hands, to try to undo the way that we kind of learned how to feed ourselves, how to exercise ourselves, how to take care of our minds and all that stuff. And also, it would be great to start seeing a trend of more doctors going direct care, which is day-to-day interactions. So you're not in the feeder system constantly. To see that feeder system broken apart a little bit and then take on hospitals and catastrophic care from an isolated standpoint where something needs to be done there, and you can't expect that to be cheap to go to the emergency room with all the technology and all of the talent that is called in to hone in on one person. It would be great to see all that. I don't need insurance to go to get a physical, because of what I have with my doctor. But it would be great for everybody to be able to shrink all of their needs down to catastrophic and things like that. And of course, there's always going to be the chronically ill. We got to get back to boutique kind of ways. We have to find a way to get the cord cut between the government and everything else so that companies can be a lot more intelligent again and go out there and provide products for people who need something that is customized. We need to customize again. That's the big thing. And before we get going, I want to do a speed round with you.
Sure.
Scams, because there's a lot of things that, inside of this big rat's nest that we have colored in together in the hour we've been on so far. There's so many more things out there that people are wondering about, and a lot of it we've actually already talked about, like how to fix rising premiums and what's behind the rise of premium payments and all that. But let's start with privacy. Okay. Before we went live tonight, on my own time, I was reading the story about how this DNA testing company just vanished along with all their customers' genetic data. Privacy. Now, that's the big thing. I said, this is a great question I should ask Chris. Privacy, especially when it comes to HIPAA. HIPAA rights and all that stuff went right out the window during the rollout of, a lot of the COVID shots and things like that. What was going on? People had to show certain types of medical information before going into buildings, before being able to go back to work. Privacy went right out the window. To what degree is our information mishandled on a normal year?
Ooh, that's a big question. I'm going to sound kind of cynical here. I don't think there's levels of privacy. There's a lot of data housed by very few entities. So when you go to the doctor and you submit your insurance, that claim and all the records tied to it, it's going through a data warehouse and it's housed there. A big one, Change Healthcare, which is owned by United Health, was hacked by ransomware. And there was a hacker that had access to millions and millions and millions of files that were HIPAA, private information, name, date of birth, social, your medical records, all of that, that was exposed. So from a HIPAA standpoint, like my employer may not know about my records, but I don't think any of our healthcare records are going to be ever fully secured because these databases can be hacked, and they have been. So I don't have an expectation of. I'm a big privacy fan. I don't think any of our data is ever going to be secure.
Okay.
So people are somebody's going to hack it. It's out there. It is what it is.
All right. I think a lot of people are on your on the same wavelength as you. I think when it comes to anything that's been digitized, records that have been digitized, or even just your presence on the internet, the reasonable expectation for privacy, I think we've all given that up a long time ago, especially if you're going to be a modern person and take part in the world. Here's the next one for you. A couple of people had gotten in touch with me about denied procedures or even refusing to cover drugs that a doctor recommends. This is huge.
Yeah.
The denied procedures question came in. I added the coverage of drugs because, for example, with ivermectin, when everybody was asking about that, hydroxychloroquine and all, it became a political hot button issue. But some insurance companies, much like major pharmacy chains, took very political stances on those drugs and refused to cover it because they deemed it ineffective or whatever. I mean, they got in between people and their doctors, and it was all politically motivated. So what can you say about that, but most importantly, denied procedures?
Yeah, there's a whole host of reasons procedures can be denied. The insurance company may look at it and say it's not medically necessary, or maybe the doctor didn't provide enough information. it is a somewhat of a problem, particularly if somebody, it's not the little things that get denied. It's usually something that's going to be expensive to the insurance company. And so they're going to look at those and make sure that it's medically necessary. Now, who deems it's medically necessary? It's usually a review board internally. Usually there's standardized procedures that an insurance company is going to have. Does it meet these particular guidelines? If not, it gets kicked back out. Doctor has to file an appeal. They've got to provide enough medical information to justify having that procedure. Oftentimes, though, when you go back, let's just think back through the incentive model here. Oftentimes, you'll go see a primary care doc. My back's hurt. Okay, I'm going to send you to a spinal surgeon or an orthopedist. Well, how does that physician make money? By doing surgery. Makes a lot of sense. I'm going to use a back procedure as a perfect example. I go see my doc. Man, this has been bothering me for 10 years. I've tried physical therapy. It doesn't work. All right, great. We're going to go in and infuse some of your discs. And so we file with the insurance company. They deny it. Why? Half the back procedures in the United States, when they're done, they're not successful. It's failed. You look at the 3-year success rate, it's 50% or less. And so the insurance company will look at this. Well, the doctor's just wanting to do the procedure because that's how he gets paid. And so oftentimes the insurance company's looking at this. What's the motive of the doctor? Are they just immediately going to doing surgeries? We want them to try a different course of treatment. I'm not a medical provider, so I can't really speak specifically what's appropriate or what's not, but it's really the insurance company at that point is looking at this and saying, is this the most appropriate course of care? Oftentimes providers, they're going to jump to how they get paid. I'm going to do this surgery. I'm going to prescribe this expensive medication. Why? Because they're incentivized by pharmaceutical companies to prescribe certain drugs.
Okay.
Insurance companies may deny a particular medication, which was your second question, because it's not on their preferred list. We're going to give you the one that's preferred by us. Why is it preferred by us as the insurance company? That's what we're going to get paid on. So you see a lot of that. Every situation is unique. I'd have to look at specific examples, but generally speaking, it's often denied or the medication's denied or procedures denied because of somebody's incentive.
Okay, next one. What are your thoughts on the death panel? Because we're talking a lot about Obamacare tonight. When the Obama administration was pushing the ACA, this is the first time in my lifetime that we heard debate about how centralization of healthcare insurance would lead to the creation of what would essentially be death panels, where human life would, by necessity, have to be greatly devalued in order to balance the checkbook of the central power, to make sure that whatever resources are coming in are going to those who most need it, who have the biggest chances of, quality of life afterwards, those who are young and able to work versus someone who's 95 and needs a heart transplant, whatever. Just whatever the hell, that's where we started hearing about it. And it became very clear to me now that it's not a stretch to suggest that the growing, especially when you see the growing euthanasia programs in North America, around the world, especially in Canada, we have to be a little bit farther down the death panel slippery slope than we think.
It already exists.
Okay.
In
what way?
Yeah, let me give you a perfect example. So, one, the government is underfunded. You look at Medicare, we're going to have some major issues in Medicare. But I'll give you just a family. I don't think it's my mom, but she needs a kidney transplant. She's going to die without a kidney transplant. And she's up in age. And if she got a kidney, she'd be a lot healthier. But Medicare's not going to pay for it because of her age. She's not, I hate to say it like this, but they're looking at this saying she's not worth the investment. And so, in my mind, it's not a technical death panel, but look, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So it's not called a death panel, but just by an essence of what it's doing, that's what it's going to cause.
Yeah.
But when you have limited resources, it's just a fact of whether you're talking about business, what do businesses invest their money in, or whether we're investing in healthcare for human beings. What's the most efficient use of the limited dollars that we have? I've got $1 million to spend. I'm just making this up. I got $1 million to spend. Do I want to invest it in somebody who's almost 80 years old, or do I want to invest it in somebody that's 20? I'm going to get a lot more value out of the dollar that I spend if I invest it in somebody that's younger. And unfortunately, the reality is there is a limited amount of money that can be spent on healthcare. And so whenever you have limited resources and more demand, you're going to have to make some very tough decisions.
Yeah.
You can't pay for anything. And in essence, I mean, that's essentially is what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I remember all the pushback against that in 2009 or 10 or something like that was no, they didn't like how bluntly it was being put out there, death panel. Whereas when you think about it in a very, very logical way, you're going to have to balance the books this way. The only thing is that on your ledger, that is equivalent to human life that you're managing. It's not you're not managing inventory in a stock room. This is human life, and you are making hard decisions about who gets resources, who doesn't. I remember in the opening year, aside from the fact that they couldn't launch the Obamacare website portal successfully, I remember that as well. $600 million website that couldn't do anything. There was also a little bit of a moment where everybody was freaking out about all of the money that was being spent by young people going to get physicals, even though they sold this as, hey, preventative care is a big part here. And then when all this money was being charged up and used by young people who want to get physicals, preventative care, they're saying, let's, how about you skip those physicals? I'm like, well, what are we spending the money on? And I mean, and it's just so much there. It's so much. And they don't like it being talked about very, very bluntly because there's no other way to go about it. Let's see. What else do I have here? Here's one, a personal situation from a friend of the show. And I want to know, and she wants to know, if you have any other insight into this happening more and more. She recently, and she can't talk publicly about it just yet because it's going to be a major legal action. She was injured during a surgery because the hospital, they allowed students to do her surgery without the patient knowing, her knowing. And she actually even said, I do not want any student involvement in this. She wants to know, are students, in your understanding and your work, do you know how often students are performing surgeries without patients knowing? Because there's a large rate of people getting injured by this after the fact. And she's one of them. And I can't speak with any more specificity, but that freaked me out to know that, hey, once the anesthesia kicks in and you're gone, who the hell in the room is touching you?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack with that one. So first, I'm going to just preface this answer with, I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm not a doctor. Um, Being able to train surgeons is really important in our country because, I mean, none of us are getting out of here alive, including those surgeons. Eventually, they're going to move on, retire, pass away, what have you. So we've got to have another generation of trained clinicians and surgeons to be able to perform those surgeries. But it shouldn't happen without disclosure to the patient. I've had a handful of orthopedic surgeries. I mean, I've had a couple ACLs, a hip replacement done. Whenever I went into the hospital, they provide you a document. It says, we have student physicians here. Do you consent to allow them to perform any part of your procedure? Hospitals are required to give you that and give you the ability to opt out. So I don't know the specifics of her case, whether she was presented that and she signed it or didn't. But if she didn't sign that document and the hospital can't produce it, and there's documentation because there's notes from the surgery. They document everything that happens inside of an OR. So if she doesn't have that disclosure authorizing them to use a student surgeon, and there's a record that they used one, it sounds like that's going to be kind of a difficult situation for the hospital to justify.
Yeah. I would have to imagine. I just want to know if this is one of those like freak incidents or if this is something that you've seen like a pattern forming over time. But okay, I'll take that. It's just so crazy to have heard something like that. And I understand students need to be able to move. You can't have somebody just work on cadavers and then all of a sudden they're doing their first heart surgery. They have to be able to be doing something on the job. There has to be. So, but again, there's the consent situation. Here's another one. Any inside information on how often there will be like upbilling on needless surgeries or needless or additional anesthesia? Do you see anything in that respect?
All the time. All the time. We see it as we look through claims data. You'll walk in, use the emergency room example. You go in with something minor where you need stitches, and it might be a level 1 ER visit. Well, level one is only going to pay a low threshold because it's not truly emergent. It can be handled in an urgent care, but you chose for convenience to go through an ER, whatever the case is. But they'll upcode it to a level three or a level four, which is like severe trauma.
Mhm.
They do that because they're able to get reimbursed higher amounts from insurance companies. So that's called upcoding, and upbilling. So you'll see that. You'll also see there's um, there's these entities out there. They're called revenue enhancement consultants. And what they do is they'll go into a hospital, they'll go into doctors' offices, and they'll look at prior episodes of care that they did and how they billed the insurance company. And they'll say, hey, we're going to teach you how to redo your billing coding and how to break these apart, and we'll increase your revenue by 15, 20, 30%. Just same episode of care, you just bill it a different way.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of games that are being played in on the healthcare side to generate more revenue from insurance companies. And the end result is insurance companies end up paying more. They end up having to charge more for insurance the next year to cover the rising costs. What's interesting to me, one of the biggest revenue enhancement consultant firms out there is owned by one of the big insurance companies. How does that make any sense?
Ah,
They're teaching them to beat their own system. They work for the insurance company. They're teaching the providers how to bill against them. What world does that even make sense?
no, none of this makes sense. You want to talk about misaligned incentives, and it's a lot from every angle. And here's another one. Here's the last one I have for you. This is from Steve in the audience. He said, Frank, I have a theory based on experience that insurance companies decline claims for no reason, often just to see if the individual resubmits it or appeals it. Often it's just a mistake afterwards, and it gets covered when it's resubmitted. You know any kind of like psychological mind games over there, Chris, where somebody will just be declined just to see if they are tenacious enough to try it again, or just walk away and forget all about it?
You know, I'm going to say I don't know specifically about that. Oftentimes, what I do see, because we deal with a lot of employers with a lot of claims, oftentimes what I notice when something is submitted and denied initially, it's because the doctor or the hospital didn't provide the right documentation. Insurance companies, in a lot of cases, they make it pretty onerous hurdle of information, and it's got to be provided in the exact way that the insurance company wants it, or they're not going to or wants it, or they're not going to approve it. So oftentimes, it's like a $15 an hour employee who works behind the front desk, just fills out the paperwork and sends it off for the doctor. It gets kicked back. Then they're required to actually go through the steps to provide the information to get it approved. That's the most frequent thing that I see. And it's happened to me personally. I mean, I go in to get something done and they said, well, your insurance company didn't approve it. I call the insurance company and they, well, they didn't provide the right information for us to be able to make a determination. That is the most frequent thing that happens. And I would just encourage any viewer or listener of this, if that happens to you, my first call would be to the insurance company. Did they get what they needed? And if not, call your provider because they're in a hurry. There's a ton of paperwork that's involved in this. They're seeing patients all day long and submitting paperwork to all these different insurance companies. Things get lost in the shuffle. And it's often the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. I mean, that old saying holds true in healthcare. Okay. Your average doctor, for every physician that's there, there's probably 7 to 10 administrative staff to support that doctor. And it's a huge administrative burden. And so sometimes that's where you're going to have to really focus your attention is making sure that they're getting your insurance company what they need to to approve it. Unfortunately,
well, you can see where the reason why people are prone to come up with these theories, Chris, because as we have done so well in this now little bit over an hour, the system is nonsensical and rife with corruption and opportunities for defrauding everything. And what the hell? It actually seems like it's built not for our best interests. Dare I say? So I guess it's good to just be reminded that not everybody out there is trying to get you, even if the system makes no sense. But Chris, that's the end for tonight. I think a lot of people are going to be very appreciative of you and the time you've given us and the information, but also are probably a little bit more interested into what you do, perhaps outside of here professionally. What is the best way that they can look into your work, especially if we have any kind of small or large company employers out there that are watching right now that want to see if they can lean out and make their healthcare situation for their employees a lot better, where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a website, fixhealthinsurance.com. And on that site, I've got a playbook, is what I call it. It's an insider playbook. As an insider to the industry, this is the work that we're doing with employers to remove misaligned incentives, conflicts of interest, to where you can lower your cost of health insurance and provide more to your employees. I give that playbook away. It's a several-page document that will kind of walk step by step systematically of what you need to do to improve your plan.
Okay. So fixhealthinsurance.com. I just added that to the description of the episode. I'll make sure that gets out to everybody when I go home to upload the podcast tonight. And I really appreciate the time you spent with us tonight. We did a lot more than I thought we were going to, but then again, this is a topic that really dominates our lives in ways that sometimes we don't even know. Like I said, it even trickles down to the way that we are able to really weigh out our employment opportunities. So thanks for everything, my friend, and I hope people go check out your work, and we'll talk again one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Frank.
Okay, thank you. Chris Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen. Go and check out his address. We put it in the description, fixhealthinsurance.com. We're going to go on a really quick break. Can I hold in my pee-pee? Can I hold it in for another 24 minutes? Or should I go on a 4-minute break? Everybody in the chat room, spam 1 if you think I should go to the bathroom real quick, and spam 2 if you think I should just keep going until my bladder explodes. Okay, spam 1 if you think I should just go to the bathroom, and I'll play you a music video from my band. Set the Charge. Or 2, if you think I should just keep doing this until my bladder explodes and everything ends right here tonight. The ones are coming in. Only 1, 2, only 1 slave driver so far. 2 slave drivers. You just keep going till your bladder explodes, bitch. Okay, thank you. Looks like the ones have it. Okay, I'll be back in 4 minutes. I won't even play the intermission video. I'm just going to play a music video so I have a little bit more time to run down the hall and come back. Don't go anywhere. This is my band. Set the Charge. Break. Done. All right. Hope you guys didn't miss me too much. I know 4 minutes is a long time to ask people to wait. Anytime I step away for 45 seconds, 300 people log off. We just got no patience. We've got no patience, but sometimes the PP must flow. That's what we're doing right now in the last 15 minutes. Let me go to the super chats, see what people are saying. Jay Britt says, wonderful guest. Great interview, Frank. I'm going to share this with my family and friends. Very informative. You're the best. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. And thank you, Rev, who says, birthday shout out to Marissa. Happy birthday, Peanut. Peanut? Peanut? Love you most. Rev loves Marissa the most. The Peanut boy. There's some hanky... No, I don't know. That might be a cousin. I'm sorry. I don't know what the hell's going on over there. But I hope Marissa's having a good night. Happy shout-out birthday to Marissa. The Peanut. You know, going back to Peanut, the squirrel, I really feel bad for Fred. You know, there was a raccoon that had its head cut off, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about that damn raccoon. It's all about Peanut. I really feel bad for Fred. Does anybody else feel bad for Fred? Does anybody else do? Somebody has to. Anyway, so I have not forgotten Fred, said Amethyst Cat on D Live. Good. I'm happy. I'm happy that you guys feel that way. Okay. And hello to our, we have a couple people over there on Rockfin. Not many people, but Kyle's over there. Hello, Kyle. You're in the jacuzzi all by yourself. It's like the old Theta chat over there. Just enough people in there to fill up a jacuzzi. All right. Over on Rumble, Jay Semo says, weren't insurers not for profit initially? I wish I had seen that. I don't know. You can always ask Grok. Boys Blanc, thank you so much. Nina Rock says, I'm on a specialty med that is $5,000 a month. I'm on a total of 13 meds and supplements. $5,000 a month. Listen, it's not, it's just a reminder of how people live. I mean, I remember they in 2022, they thought my mother might have AFib, and thankfully she does not. But when they thought that might be the case, they were going to put her on this. They were going to put her on this medication. I don't know what the hell it was. I forget what it was called. It was astronomical. It was crazy money. And I know that this is what most people work for. Everything is just about, making that the overhead, and insurance is just everything. So it's a crazy situation, but from a business model, there's something wrong with it all. And I'm not nearly as specialized enough to know exactly what, but the basics don't check out. Boyce Blanc says, here in Michigan, my company has limited options for my company to provide insurance. Limited options. Porpoiseful, thank you so much. And Braves Piano 29, thank you as well. It's been a good night. Really has been a good night. I'm glad we were able to get into this because it's a big topic. And it's going to come front and center over the course of the next administration. But yeah, there you go. Katie Sky on the Gilded just says, I haven't checked it out yet, but fixyourhealthcare.com site might be the most helpful resource promoted on this show. Wait, fixyourhealthcare.com? Is that what his fixyourhealthcare.com? I just want to make sure I got the right thing down. Is that what I put in the description of the episode? Hold on, let me see. Fix Healthcare. No, he said fixhealthinsurance.com. Right? I think he said fixhealthinsurance.com. I'll double check it afterwards. Hopefully I got the right thing down there. Unless we're talking about something different. All right, there you go. Well, I can't wait to hear what people are sending me after the fact, because there's going to be a lot of comments and questions, and everybody's situation is obviously different. But I would like to just throw this out there before I have to change the title of the show, and it is very important stuff. Oh, wait, no, there is something over here. Hi, Frank. This is from Hillary. Frank, I heard you mention on the podcast the other night about wanting the pharmaceutical ads to be taken off of TV. As a retired nurse, I never encountered a patient asking their doctor for a drug that they saw advertised. I have long thought that the pharmaceutical companies were more likely doing those ads as a form of bribery to the TV networks. That way they could exert control on the content because of the big money that they provided. Just food for thought. Thanks for all that you do. Kind regards, Hillary. Okay, well, I'll accept your theory, but I will throw one back at. Well, I'll throw a question back at you. Bribery. What would the point of? What would the point of putting? What would the point be to put your commercials for your drugs on television if not for being able to reach and influence people? And I don't know how much it would be bribery more than transaction. And maybe it's a you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours kind of a thing. I mean, who out there were bigger salesmen for healthcare products over the last 4 years than the media? So to take those for Pfizer and other companies like that and just reinvest their record profits over the last few years into their advertising. I don't know how that is. I don't know how that works out and what the intention could be other than primarily trying to influence people. As Jay Gulanello has pointed out on this show and just reminded me again before, because we were talking about how taking television ads off, these ads off of the TV could really impact the major networks that are really are saturated by them. That's 70%. He said, Frank, 70% of their advertising dollars is coming from pharma companies. 70%. CNN would be operating on a skeleton crew. You'd be seeing a lot more, Huggies and Charmin commercials. A lot more Charmin commercials will be on the air if that went away. 70%. That's huge. You can't tell me that that's not a part of a psychological operation. And I'll trade you in an anecdote for an anecdote, Hillary. Whereas I was on a healthcare provider, I did bear witness to this very thing at the pharmacy I was working at all throughout high school and throughout college as well. The pharmacy I worked at all throughout those years closed in 2006, just before I graduated college, because Medicare Part D killed it, pretty much. But either way, I bear witness to this on a number of occasions. Not a large amount, but enough to just say there's people out there who are doing this. I don't know. I mean, not only did I have many people admit that they inquired about the drugs that they saw on television when they went to their doctor, but it was even worse. Over the years, more than a handful of people admitted to firing their doctors, leaving their doctors, because they were not being prescribed new medications. So it was like what they had expressed in so many words was that they were considering the measure of their doctor's worth. The measure of their doctor's worth was based upon whether or not they were walking away with a new script every so often. Okay? That's crazy right there. That's crazy to me. One woman in particular, I can remember her face. She saw this as a true measure of how much a doctor cared, and she got rid of him because she hadn't been prescribed something new in a while. So now I am certain this is not anywhere near a majority of people, but prescription drugs are definitely part of the culture. Part of the culture. They are hand in glove with anybody out there who is talking about healthcare in a mainstream sense. Managing your healthcare through medicine, it's part of the culture. So you can't tell me, and I'm sure you're not saying it doesn't happen. You're just saying that, Hillary, I'm talking to you, that where you worked, you didn't see anybody doing that. But there's no other reason why they would sink all that into advertising dollars if they didn't want to be able to plant a bug in people's ear. you know? Okay, so let's see. What else do we have? Oh, this one over here from Ukraine, because we got 5 minutes left. Then I want to tell you what's going on in the after hours. Ukraine's ATACMs strike on Russia. It comes after Putin lowers the threshold for nukes. About a day after President Biden authorized Ukraine to use long-range U.S.-made MGM-140 Army tactical missile system to strike deeper into Russian territory, a new report suggests that the Ukrainian armed forces have hit a military installation in the western Bryansk region. It just sounds like a space alien. Bryansk. This comes after Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Russia's nuclear weapons doctrine was changed and signed by President Vladimir Putin, indicating, quote, the use of Western non-nuclear rockets by armed forces of Ukraine against Russia can prompt a nuclear response, end quote. And apparently when that was brought up to the potato, as everybody calls him, Joe Biden, his response was not surprised. He's not surprised. Going to do it anyway. These people are nuts. These people are nuts. You know, there's Biden, it's not him, but they're doing everything they can to leave a paralyzing war in the lap of their successor. And I guess what it comes down to is, for me, there are varying degrees of stupid and varying degrees of evil, and many times they overlap in varying degrees. We are up against a lot of that right now, and there are stupid people out there who have always bought the Ukraine versus Russia, David versus Goliath story, but then there are those out there who know damn well what this is really all about, and they just simply don't care. Just like they don't care about, they'll swallow vegetable oil out of spite. They will put fluoride in their water out of spite. They're nuts. They're nuts. They don't care about the death toll in Ukraine. Only on the surface they do. They don't care about anything but not having to deal with headlines that embarrass them politically. That's the kind of people we're dealing with right now more and more, whether it be Burisma or the Azov battalion being full of Nazis, or the denial and now the confirmation of biolabs all over the place, on the books, off the books. Every eastward encroachment by NATO since the fall of the Berlin Wall. They will ignore all of that stuff if it's not politically expedient. But make no mistake, there are many who walk among us who would rather see a debilitating war spread rapidly across Europe than having Donald Trump pursue his domestic agenda without distraction. Make no mistake. That's where we are right now. And the one last question I'll leave you all, maybe we'll take some of these calls Thursday or Friday, because tomorrow night is going to be something. I don't know what kind of time we'll have set up. Maybe we'll have a second half that we can do some calls tomorrow. But again, General Flynn on air calling for the removal of Joe Biden over the provocation of World War III with Russia. That comes by way of Alex Jones. Our buddy Craig Mason, with all the mention of the 25th Amendment, put out Donald Trump's statements from the end of his first term, talking about how the 25th Amendment talk will come back to haunt Joe Biden and the Biden administration. Now, I don't know what the hell this could all really mean, especially since it's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden seems like he'd be perfectly content with his ice cream and his MAGA hat and just leaving after Christmas break, and that's it. So whoever the hell is making Joe Biden do this stuff would be doing the same thing through the sock puppet, the more willing sock puppet, Kamala Harris. So I don't know what that means. Do you have any theories on why this would be thrown out there, especially by people who understand that Biden is a completely inconsequential person with no autonomy whatsoever? If you have any theories of your own, you can drop it into the Telegram. You can go into the Gilded. You can email me at quitefranklypodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to hear about it. He has no political autonomy. What would it matter to change the puppet in the last month and a half? The mystery of all time. Okay, let's see here. Winston Dave says it should get a bottle, human ailment range extender do I know what the hell? I don't know what the hell that is. Thank you, Winston. I don't know what that E word is. Esther says, be insured. That I appreciate you, Frank. Oh, if I could only get insurance that way. Because I know the audience is very appreciative, and I'm appreciative of them. If that appreciation could be collateral for really gold star insurance, I would feel like $1 million right now. But you know what? Maybe we're just at the start of a major shakeup, a parallel restorative economy coming back into play. Wouldn't that be nice? Chai Possum, thank you for your last gold pill. That's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we have coming up right as I end right now. It's 8:58 p.m. By 9:01 p.m. on quitefrankly.tv, the After Hours programming goes as follows. Peter Thiel, AI, intelligent, conscious, or merely evil. That's interesting. Very controversial character, that Thiel guy. Michael Franzese, Tupac case detective exposes truth about the Diddy case. Robert Phoenix, The Dawn of a New Day or Dystopia. And then an Art Bell kicker, as is usually the tradition, with Nick Redfern. I've heard that one before. Art Bell with Nick Redfern, Unsolved Mysteries. So that all begins in just a minute or so on quitefrankly.tv. Go there, press play, hang out, and talk in the chat room. And while you're over there, hit the forum and give us your family photos, your festive family photos, or your all-time favorite family Christmas card so we can put it into the newsletter. Also become a sponsor of the show. I'm here kicking ass with you every night of the week, and there's usually about 8 to 9 hours of work that leads up before that time going live and all throughout the evening and, oh man, and all throughout the weekends. I have great pleasure doing this show, and thank you guys for supporting it. Many years to come, God willing. Talk to you soon. Have a great night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.